Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matiha, and I am the chair of the National Network of Parents and Carers in Higher Education. An absolute delight to welcome you all here today, and particularly for giving up your lunch hour on a Tuesday afternoon. So I'm really hoping that today we will start at prompt. We have started at 1. We will finish at 2 o'clock as promised on the Eventbrite. If you are not speaking, please do put yourselves on mute just so that the user experience is good and everybody can hear each other clearly. May I also request, as much as I love to see all of you, if you are not a speaker or a panelist today, is it okay if you could please switch your cameras off purely, again, for the user experience? Thank you very much. So today's conversation is about the many faces of fatherhood. We will talk about that in a minute, but purely just doing some housekeeping rules first. This is really a platform for all of us to come together, to share the experiences from each other, and really have the value in learning together, learning from each other. I have a brilliant panel today who will be talking about their experiences. I do encourage you all to participate through the chat function. This is all being recorded, so you will receive a recording later on. I would also ask you to consider this as a safe space and think about what you might say that could have an impact on others as well. Delighted to say that we had over 100 registrations for this session today, which only brings home the reality that the focus on men's mental health needs is less so as it could be, really. And this is one of the reasons we will be talking to Kevin particularly today about what strategies we can use. This is only the beginning of a conversation. There will be loads of these conversations coming your way. We really want to put the spotlight on the experience of parents, carers, fathers, grandfathers, mothers, grandmothers, etc. Not only who have caring role for their children, but also who have caring role for their own parents, for example, myself. I see lots of friends on call today, so really warm welcome. I think over 60 universities are presented here today in the joining and the list of people who are here, so really pleased. Not only universities, and you'll be happy to hear there are think tanks today. There are research institutes here on the call today. Somebody from the DADPAD, I don't even know what that is. Somebody from Split the Difference, again, another organization I didn't know about. So warm welcome to everybody who is joining. Without further ado, let's get started. To put things into context, I will invite a speaker. I will pose a question to them. I will ask them to share their thoughts on that. And after that, we will move to the next speaker. After the 3 speakers have spoken, there will be a chance at the end to have questions and answers. I assure you of that. And we will finish before 2 o'clock, definitely. There's this lovely bird chirping in the background. I'm loving it, but may I request for anybody who is not on mute to please go on mute, just so that the user experience is good. Right, with that out of the way, my first speaker, it is Khalid Afzal, who I've met very recently, about a few months ago, and I was actually delighted to hear about Khalid. This actually event was one of the inspirations that came to me after speaking to Khalid about Khalid's experiences of fatherhood, what that meant to him, and how it has affected him in many ways. And Khalid will speak about that in a minute. My question to you, Khalid, and please do introduce yourself at the beginning. Here's my question. What is your experience of a father's role and navigating a relationship at the same time? In what ways has it affected you, and how has it helped you grow as a coach? Over to you, Khalid.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madia. So yeah, I'm Kaz. I'm a student coach at the University of Central Lancashire. And to be honest, yeah, I did have a bit of a unscripted story, which hopefully will answer some of those questions in the short space of time that we've got. So, I'll start from the beginning and sort of explain to you some of the experiences I've been through and what sort of the learning points are from it, because it's been a bit of a challenging experience. And if you do find any of this triggers you, please make sure you've got someone to speak to afterwards. And if you want to ask me any questions, you can email me after. I just wanted to make that super clear. So actually, yeah, my journey into fatherhood actually started from being a single guy in my mid-20s, never thinking that I'd meet anybody who already has children from a previous relationship. I was very independent. I was, enjoying being, mid-20s, feeling super independent, but actually realizing that maybe I wasn't as independent as I thought, and that's a whole of a coaching journey that I've been through. Thinking, well, if I meet somebody in life, and if I find a life partner, great, but I'm not in a rush. But as life has it, sometimes our thoughts don't necessarily reflect our feelings, and I was quite surprised by finding out that, I met somebody and fell head over heels in love, regardless of my beliefs beforehand about when I should meet somebody and how. And this person came from another culture and a background that was very similar to mine, but also had a lot of differences as well. So, a bit of both, and from a different country. For the sake of this conversation, I will use different names for confidentiality. Carly had very similar views, morals, and this made me just, a lot of the things that I saw and a lot of the ways that she was different to me and how she was a bit peaceful and a bit more relaxed, whereas I'm quite a high energy person. Really thought, wow, this is a really nice balance that I've got in this relationship. Now, from the beginning of the relationship, I did know that she already had two children from a previous relationship, and actually that didn't phase me, whereas I thought it really would have. It didn't phase me because I thought, well, if this person's so great and so amazing, and we're going through that honeymoon phase, and it's all really nice, they're going to be a reflection of that. So I put a lot of trust and faith into something that I'd never thought I'd ever do before. When I've So in terms of meeting the children, I was super nervous, and I'm not normally the nervous person. I'm usually quite confident, and I was really nervous because I didn't know how they were going to be, what they were going to be like with another person entering into their lives. At the same time as I just wanted it to be easy. I wanted it to be nice. And you know what? Actually, the children were absolutely fantastic, and they weren't like many children I met before. They were very quite quiet and calm, but also very warm and welcoming. And I thought this was a beautiful start to a relationship, especially me coming into a family. Coming from being someone on my own to wanting to be trusted, wanting to be welcomed. As the relationship went on, yes, navigating a relationship whilst trying to raise children had its challenges and had its differences and disagreements. And one thing that I really noticed was, this is so strange because I've come like straight into the middle of the relationship with these children that are already there, rather than having that relationship, having that time with just me and Carly at the time, and then having children and giving birth and raising them. Um, so it was a bit of a strange experience coming into the deep end, and that's why I had to be a bit more mindful of my own habits and my behaviors. What am I bringing into this relationship, and how am I going to influence these children? What are my boundaries? It was quite a lot to learn and to take on. And Carly put a lot of trust in me. She, worked funny patterns. She wanted me to mind the children as we, got more comfortable. And I, took them on days out. But then I also saw that there was maybe some behaviors that, she might not deem as acceptable between the two of them, or, certain things that happened. And as much as a step parent or as a carer who's not biological parent, you might feel that you have to create that separation, but it's really hard when you're emotionally involved and you want to feel part of a family and you want to feel love. It's really hard. There is some obviously boundaries that you need to be aware of, but you can't completely be emotionally disconnected, because if you're wanting to grow and thrive with a family, you want to feel part of their family as much as they want you to be involved. So I had to navigate that very carefully. I did learn a lot, and there was a lot of imposter syndrome, and there was a lot of self-doubt in that, well, I'm not the biological parent. Maybe they'll judge me. Maybe they don't see me, or kind of view my values as important as theirs. And all these doubts play in your mind. And sometimes through that relationship, and I know this was my own fears and doubts that I had to work on, which was, sometimes it did feel like I thought it was three against one if ever there was a disagreement, or if ever there was, some kind of disciplinary that I had to sort of vocalize because of rules that me and Carly had agreed on. And this was really challenging situation. And some of it was partly, I think, due to the fact that, I didn't have that self-belief and I didn't have that trust and faith that they loved me regardless. And I think some of it might have also played a part in that they realized that I'm not their, biological father, and they do have a father back in their home country. Other problems that, and challenges that occurred were, the children would go back and visit family. They'd come back, and it would be really hard trying to get them back to those rules and patterns and behaviors that me and Carly tried to instill. So it was a really interesting journey. It did pose a lot of challenges, and it did make me and Carly have to understand and realize a lot quickly. We had to work on our our understanding of each other, our values, our compromises, our non-compromises, our things that we agree to disagree on. Because I guess without children, you go through your relationship, you do have your arguments or your disagreements, but then when children are involved, it's more important to be on the same page. And it can make you feel really fearful and really doubtful and really insecure, being in a vulnerable position of, well, actually, I'm somebody coming into this family that's not my biological children. Um, Unfortunately, this short story, this brief story, because I realize I'm time conscious, it doesn't itself self-contained story doesn't necessarily have the happiest ending. Unfortunately, Carly did decide that she wanted to go back home, that her and her children missed where they were from. And unfortunately, what we had in the relationship wasn't enough to make it work for the both of us. Um, and it really, really hurt. I'm not going to lie. It's still quite fresh, if I'm being honest. It's not been long since this has happened. And it really puts yourself into doubt, and it makes you really disbelief yourself, like, have disbelief about yourself. Now, during the 6 years, I was becoming a coach, a mindset coach. I'm working as a student coach in the university. So what I thought was, wow, I'm learning all these amazing things. All these things I'm learning about myself will help me grow as a person. They'll help me be more open-minded. They'll help me, be more accepting of other people's choices and make me more flexible. And that'll only help my family and help me grow. And then as soon as this happened, I was like, wow, like everything just felt like it was a lie. Like everything that I felt like I tried to work on did the opposite of what it was supposed to do. It felt like I should close back in, or maybe I'm not very good at being a coach, or maybe I can't do these things. If I can't coach other people, if I can't look after my own family, or work on the things I want to work on with the people in my life, how can I coach and preach and advise or support other people? It really put me in a lot of self-belief. But it took me maybe a bit of time after that to look back and realize, well, actually, what's the gift in this situation? And thank God that I did learn to be a coach, that I had all these skills and tools and resources to deal with the situation. But I also looked back and thought, actually, this process of change and growth that I've done through the relationship and where I am now is the things that have happened are a result of me trying to change. The things that have happened to me aren't necessarily things that, it makes me a terrible person. It's because I've tried to change, I've tried to grow, and I've tried to expand myself the best way I can. And maybe that wasn't the right path that, I could provide for the family I was with, or maybe Carly had her own things she has to deal with, and it just wasn't the right time. So as much as it's sad that I've lost a family and sad that it didn't work out, I've also learned a lot. And there's maybe three main points that I can take away from this. And it sounds like, how do you recover from that? How do you feel like you've done anything right? And actually looking back, there was a lot of things I feel I did right. And there's a lot of things I think you have to go through, whether you are even a biological parent or a step parent. And number one, so there's 3 points I've got. Number one is believing in your own ability, but also knowing your boundaries. So especially as a step parent, I know what boundaries not to cross. I knew what I had to do, but I also had to believe in my ability to love, and that it's okay. The approach I'm taking is okay to try and love them and try and implement, good habits or healthy habits that I believe, but also trying to eliminate those bad toxic habits that might have come from, my parents or my upbringing. And to realize actually the biological parents are learning as well. So they're going through this journey of learning and how to become a parent, because their children are constantly changing and growing. So, in the end of the day, they're learning just as much as I'm trying to learn. We all might be in different positions and different, safeguarding positions or whatever legal positions you want to call it, but we're still all learning to be parents. It's not that I was any less of a loving parent than they were. We just took different approaches. Number two was compromise where you can, and it's really important to work with your partner, wherever, again, they're biological, whether you're a step parent. It's having that support of your partner, and I knew that I needed to support them and I needed to understand and learn from them, but I knew it was just important that I needed to keep my identity. And if I didn't respect my own boundaries, I would have completely lost my identity. I wouldn't have been who I wanted to be, and that would have meant I wasn't accepted for who I was in that family dynamic. So I think it's important to respect each other and to compromise where you can, and where you can't compromise, try and learn from each other, try and understand each other, but try and come to mutual rules so that you aren't undermining each other in front of children, because then that'll just confuse them growing up. That'll confuse their upbringing. And finally, the work starts with the adults. The work starts with you. Again, children are like sponges, they'll absorb things. And one thing that I thought is going through this relationship is, oh, are they this way? Are the children behaving this way because they're not my children? Are they behaving this way because they're only learning things from the biological parents or from their upbringing and culture? And then I realized, looking back, well, it's not their fault. They're just absorbing things and absorbing things from the parents, and they absorbed a lot of things from me, and actually looked at some of the great things that and habits and behaviors that I felt maybe I was a part of, and I felt a little bit proud of that. But the you have to iron out those toxic things. You have to look at those ingrained unhealthy habits that don't serve you anymore, or thoughts that don't serve you anymore from parenthood, from your upbringing, and try and work on those with your partner, work on those on yourself before you can help others. We're all on a learning journey. And, we've all got things that we do to keep us protected because we're scared, because we're fearful. We do things and we tell people to act a certain way because of how we act a certain way out of fear, but we have to act out of love. So first, we've got to love ourselves and be okay with ourselves. And then when we communicate with our partners and we instill those values and those rules and those family upbringings, then everything falls into place. It all starts from within and the ripple effect goes outwards. So I hope that short account of my experiences maybe resonated, maybe helped, maybe given you some ideas. I was quite scared to do this today because it is still very fresh. This is the first time I've talked about this, especially openly to so many people. And yeah, like I say, if you've got any questions, please message me and please make sure you've got someone to speak to if any of this has, triggered you in any way. And thank you very much for listening. Thanks for having me, Madia. Yeah.
Yes, this is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing a very personal and a very vulnerable, if I may, that side of you. And it resonates with me on so many levels. And I think I was making notes here on this screen, and you have spoken you've touched on so many different elements. You've spoken about that sense of insecurity. You've spoken about how it leads to self-doubt, imposter syndrome, and sometimes how you've very clearly demonstrated how those feelings and those emotions, they can sometimes seep into your professional life, particularly you as being a coach. And there's so much packed in there. I want to unpick some of those things, but perhaps later. I think for now, you've done a brilliant opening. And by the way, excellent timing as well. Hi, Daniel. Would you mind putting your mic and camera off, please? We're just going to the next speaker then. We'll catch up later. So, Kaz, thank you again. I've put your details in the chat section. I hope that people will reach out to you. I think this opening is brilliant because this is exactly what we want to do. We want to normalize asking for support, and we want to normalize these conversations. So thank you so much. Hold a few thoughts. I'll come back to you in the Q&A section. We now move on to our next wonderful panelist, Dr. Katie Barfoot. Katie, please do introduce yourself at the beginning. And my question to you here, let me read it off the screen. Please tell us about your research and the representation of fathers and male carers. We all know that they are not at the forefront. How is it linked with support services? How it affects their willingness to approach support services? Why are fathers and male carers mostly reluctant to reach out to support services? That's not me saying it, that's what the research tells us. What can we do to improve this ingrained view in our research, in our services, and in our networks? So I'll put my camera off. Katie, over to you. Take it away.
Thank you, Medea. I am going to share some slides.
You should be able to. You are a presenter.
Yeah.
Perfect. So, yeah, we can see that. Yeah.
Brilliant. Everything is visible. Excellent. So yeah, thank you very much for having me here today. 10 minutes was a bit of a challenge for me, I have to admit, to try and get everything in that I wanted to say. But I want to kind of bring to you today a bit of an overview of fatherhood, specifically focusing on the mental health aspects of being a father or being a father figure or a carer role, as you say, Medea. It doesn't just kind of, it's not a one size fits all label. So I am a lecturer at University of Reading, and I have predominantly research interests across kind of nutrition, cognition, and particularly in recent years, mood and mental health in parents as well. So just a bit of an overview of what I'm going to talk through today. I'm going to go a little bit into my research, which was the catalyst in a way that I didn't realise for making me question what's going on with fathers here, which I'll go into a little bit later on. How we can then take away from the research and the problems it may present, how can that inform the kind of bigger picture on fatherhood and how we then approach support to men and fathers as well. And just a kind of caveat, when I'm talking about fathers in the presentation, I am using that as a label today to encompass a range of roles that we know, that the many faces of fatherhood. So a bit of a kind of beginning of where I've come from and how I've come into now looking at this type of work. So my PhD focused in a completely different area. I was looking at nutritional intervention research, specifically kind of superfoods, and giving those to children and adults, looking at their cognitive and their mood effects. And during my PhD, I met my current husband, and I welcomed a stepson to the family. So, Khalid, that your experience has really resonated with me. I kind of have a very similar experience as a stepmum. And shortly after my PhD, I then had a son of my own. And being involved in this in my personal life, and the kind of, you know, living experience of being a parent and seeing other mums and dads and parents around me going through this, made me realise that actually this is an at-risk population of poor mental health. And so naturally, when I returned to work, I wanted to kind of focus my intervention research, and kind of marry that with this parent experience, with the aim of trying to kind of prevent or reduce severity of poor mental health symptoms in this at-risk period, and seeing whether we could do that through some kind of diet or lifestyle change. So I leapt into this research, focusing on postnatal mothers, because when you delve into that research area, that is the predominant, oh, sorry, I'm getting some feedback there.
That's okay, Katie. So all colleagues who are just joining us now, it would be great if you could please mute your speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we leapt into the research initially with postnatal mothers because the research there is abundant, that you know, mood outcomes in mothers you know, are quite bad postnatally, generally. So we implemented this 2-week dietary flavonoid intervention, which is kind of foods to do with those superfoods I was talking about, blueberries, teas, things like that. And that was quite successful. We found that actually following this dietary intervention seemed to reduce anxiety. Great, you know, this looks like it's got promise. And we very naively went, well, let's just do it now in fathers. Let's just do the exact same thing in fathers and see what happens. And, you know, we did have rationale behind this in that, you know, mental health in new fathers is actually quite similar to in mothers. So we find when we look at the research into postnatal depression, that most research focuses on mothers, where there's about a 10 to 15% prevalence of postnatal depression. But actually looking at paternal depression, this prevalence is quite similar. So about 10.4% of fathers will also have postnatal depression, and there's specific kind of sensitive period, it seems, around this 3 to 6 month postnatal mark as well, where it might be kind of more likely. So this kind of led us to think, well, actually, this research is just as much, it's just as kind of needed in dads as it is in mums. So let's go ahead and do it and see if it improves fathers' outcomes as well. So we leapt in, we set up this new intervention study. We recruited mothers again, but we did this subgroup of fathers as well. And we were quite shocked in that we didn't really get any results from our dads, because we found that actually a lot of our fathers didn't comply with the nutritional interventions. They weren't kind of eating the foods that we would have liked them to eat. There was a high dropout rate as well. So fathers would sign up and then we kind of wouldn't hear from them, or they'd just say they didn't want to do it anymore. And a lot of our fathers were unresponsive. So again, kind of not replying to emails. We just couldn't get back in touch. And this was a new thing for us. With our mothers, we found the engagement was good, and we didn't find these things. And this led us to think, why? Why has this disengagement happened in this subgroup of fathers? We kind of had a few theories around why this might be. The participants would receive Amazon gift card, I think it was, at the end. So we thought well, maybe it's incentive driven, maybe the fathers kind of just want the gift card. But we kind of thought, I think there's more, you know, there's got to be more to that. And we kind of thought, well, actually, maybe this intervention can't be lifted from one group and applied to another. Maybe this doesn't really meet fathers' needs or interests. Maybe an intervention that was better focused or better tailored to fathers or men might be kind of more, give us kind of a better response. Which then led us forward to our next study, where we thought, okay, we need to go right back to basics, to the drawing board. We're going to release this questionnaire that is going to ask fathers about their different lifestyle habits, looking at diet, looking at exercise, looking at the relationships they hold, their social lives, and look at mood outcomes and see if there is an area where you know, intervention may be better for these dads. So if we find low mood is correlating with low levels of exercise, we might think, well, maybe exercise would be a better intervention for these fathers. Sadly, we found exactly the same thing again. We had a very low completion rate, and I've put ongoing and on and on and on because this questionnaire is still open now, and you know, we're really struggling to have fathers engage in just the online questionnaire at this point. And I think you know, I attended the last event from the network, and I found that it seems as though across the board, across perhaps research, healthcare services, and networks, there is some engagement issues, you know, with fathers or men. You know, there's research to suggest as well that men kind of go to the doctor less, or they go to the doctor kind of quite late on in their kind of prognosis, and they don't engage as much in services, mental health services particularly, and in our networks as well. So in our university parent network that we have at University of Reading, I do notice that there's a disproportionate amount of activity between females and males as well. And so what I've kind of realised from my research that fathers maybe aren't engaging as much may be applicable across many services. And I guess there is an issue in the stats we have, and the research we have can only show evidence from those who have sought help or have completed research. So there's potentially a huge gap where we are not capturing men's or fathers' experiences. And when you look into the literature a little bit deeper, I'm not going to go into it all today. I'm conscious of the time. But we have a number of reasons why we find that fathers might not engage with these four sectors. And they often kind of draw together around stigma. So whether that's the public stigma of fathers, which kind of brings in this idea of, you know, fathers are trying to adhere to masculine ideals, or there's a gender role conflict, or it's to do with self-stigma as well. So kind of you know, thinking that they're not competent, or that fathers aren't able to, or which has been found to correlate with low help-seeking behaviours. Also denial as well, kind of thinking that they maybe don't need help, and access to services. So, you know, kind of there's actually a boundary in terms of accessing a mental health service or a support service. So these are potentially, I guess, I'm trying to flag, I guess, with these, that these may be areas that we can tackle to increase engagement, or at least learn about engagement in these services. And you know, the more I thought about this, the more I realised that I've come across stigmas or social norms quite often in the other work I do, and also in my personal life as well. So you know, being a mum, and I have found that there does seem to be more things available to me as a mum than there is to my husband. And that bothers me because he's doing the exact same as me. So why is he got less support than me? So there's kind of maybe this idea that, you know, fathers are periphery. They're on the periphery in society. And just to bring up, you know, where I've seen that, I've been involved in some kind of NHS work where we have been looking at sudden infant death syndrome, and we have been focusing on promoting good, safe sleep practice to parents. And in these meetings and discussions, a lot of them revolve around the information that's being given to mother, or focus on what mother's doing and behaving, whereas fathers are also involved in putting their babies to sleep, and so, you know, there needs to be a shift. Thinking of my own experience and you know, looking into the NHS kind of standardized checks, these midwives and health checks after birth, they tend to focus on mother. I asked my husband the other day, do you remember at any point being asked if you were okay, or somebody checking in with you about your mental health from any service or anywhere, after we'd had our baby? And he said no. And so, you know, I think that's another area that you know, something could be focused on to include father. As I said, the University Parent and Family Network where I am, I've noticed that there's no dedicated father space. And I think this is something I'm particularly interested in changing. So if anybody here today has experience of creating a successful father space, I'd be really keen to hear from you, to you know, share ideas. I think this is a really important thing to work on. And generally as well, we find that in the UK, our policies seem to be different in terms of mothers and fathers, and fathers are often given less parental leave, and they're not really, the flexible working arrangements are not particularly advertised well to fathers, and it's usually utilised by mothers. That's something as well that I think could be brought to the forefront a little bit more.
Kiki, just the 1 minute signal, please.
Okay.
Nadia.
Oh my goodness, I have yes. So I'm going to just hopefully we can share these slides at the end, Medea, in case anybody can.
Absolutely, please. You know, you still have like 60-70 seconds. Please continue.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I have, as I said, it was hard to reduce. My main kind of concluding takeaway then is kind of, we know that male carers are integral to the family. Where is this space for fathers' voices? And, you know, are there limited resources because of this potential periphery nature that fathers may be perceived to have? And research have kind of called for the same kind of thing. So my kind of takeaway is that it's perhaps not wise to apply what works for mothers for fathers. We may have to work from the bottom up, to assess with fathers and father figures what are their needs and what might work for them. And so now my efforts are focused not on the research, because that doesn't seem to be working. I feel like we need to tackle this before we can do the research. What could a father's space look like? And I think it's really important to focus on the language that we use when we are bringing these fathers together. If we were to coordinate a dads group, I think maybe some dads might have this kind of image from our daddy daycare, and they may feel this might not represent them, or that this may not be a group they'd wish to join. Similarly, if we advertise a parent group, bringing up ideas of potentially a female dominated group where you have, you know, the odd father there, and again, this may not meet the needs or engage fathers in the way we'd hoped they would. So this was a potential idea, obviously an old-fashioned idea without any, you know, without any space for the sexism it may have held back then. But maybe a return of the men's club, a space where men can get together to socialise, to eat, to drink, to play sports, may be a potential niche way of receiving this indirect support that may be more suited to men's needs. And I guess my kind of my ending slide is to welcome you all. You know, if you are a father or a father figure in whatever face that may be, I would love to hear your views on what would encourage you to attend a fathers meetup. So I will kind of leave that there if you'd like to scan the QR code or go to Menti to give your views, because I think this is really important to work collaboratively, so that we are providing the support to men and fathers, you know, from you. So thank you very much for listening. You can email me if you have any questions or you want to connect, and I'm also on Twitter as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katie. This is me clapping for you. And I'm so sorry I had to intervene. I think the risk with always with these conversations is they are so interesting and there's so much to cover and so much to say, but we are always limited because of time. We always have so much to share, but because of time limitations, etc., it's just very difficult. But thank you. That was brilliant, and I have put in your contact details. And like in your presentation, Katie, you've touched on really important elements about the fact that it starts with the engagement with fathers and how do we reach that group and how do we make sure that their opinions and voices are heard. Yesterday, I was doing some research and there was, if split the difference, people are here today. Guys, I looked at your website and I was shocked to actually discover that you're right. There is a UN Women that exists, but there is no UN Men that exists. So who advocates for men's rights? But anyway, thank you for that, Katie. In the interest of time, we will move to our final speaker, Kevin Brasant. And Kevin, I'm going to make it harder for you now. So you remember we had 2 questions we were going to ask you, but because I want to make sure we have enough time at the end for questions and answers, would you mind then responding to my 2 questions in one? And you've got about 10 minutes, 12 minutes to do that. And the questions are, what are the key challenges and barriers to fathers seeking help and participation in public services? And the follow-up question is that tell us about promoting positive father involvement, Daddy CPR. Take it away, Kevin.
Brilliant. Thank you, Madia. Can everyone hear me as we start? Because I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with MS Teams. So, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for confirming that. Actually, Katie and Khalid has done a good job in actually setting up my session because they've spoken in some detail around some of the barriers, actually. So, Madia, I would argue that one of your questions have already been answered by our panelists previously, but I'm sure I'll add to the discussion anyway. So my name's Kevin Brasant. I'm a university teaching fellow and accredited coach at London Metropolitan University. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this theme around promoting positive father involvement as part of practice. So as part of my work, basically, I want to talk about my immediate context of working mainly with social work students within higher education. So I'm going to be reflecting on a small scale case study which shares the outcome of a research project which was delivered between 2019 and last year. The project used the participatory methodology in the curriculum area of social work. I was working mainly with both undergraduate and postgraduate students. It provided the space for students to collaboratively develop their ideas and think about their practice learning, particularly when working with men as caregivers and as fathers as part of their practice. As a result of the intervention, there were substantial case studies that was produced with students even feeling impassioned to want to pursue their own research projects as part of their dissertations, exploring these issues. And actually, one local authority has since adopted the approach as part of their practice and are using it as part of their supported the ASYE program, which is obviously for their assessed and supported year in employment. And this mainly targets newly qualified social workers as part of practice. And then what I want to do is talk about how I've used that research to apply it to my coaching practice as part of promoting positive father involvement. So at the moment, Katie has already laid the land, particularly looking at mental health and well-being. So thank you, Katie, for doing so. And I think this fits into a bigger picture around this theme around whether or not there's this crisis of masculinity. Obviously, there are different factors that come to contribute and could influence that. But I think it is a question that is very much on our lips at the moment. And we're thinking about how men are responding to issues, particularly when they're in crisis. And what I've done, because Kate is spoken at great length and Kate's done a brilliant job of talking about parental leave and shared leave. So I've just got a few clippings and images up on the screen at the moment, which speaks to, I think, the multitude of issues that affect men, particularly when we talk about societal expectations for fathers. And in particular, looking at issues around relationship breakdown as well, particularly after separation and divorce. It becomes incredibly difficult for fathers and for men in particular. But I'm going to move on and talk a little bit more about how men are generally represented in the media, particularly around fathers. Now, I don't watch, some of you may be familiar with the BBC sitcom Mother's Land. I'll be honest, I don't watch it. I've not watched it. I'm not big on TV sitcoms. But apparently what's come to the fore of late, and would you imagine this guy shares the same name as me as well, his name's Kevin. But apparently the father who's depicted in this, Kevin, has been, well, basically his character's come under attack because people believe that he's being represented as being quite wimpy and unmasculine when looking at stay-at-home dads. And this is quite interesting. And I think this feeds into the wider media discourse around how men generally show up in the public consciousness when it comes to fathers more generally. And obviously, this couldn't be at odds with the truth, really, because for those of you that have been checking in, recent research has told us that actually the number of stay-at-home dads has gone up in the UK, up by a third. And actually, as a result of that, you know, more men are asking to trade in the office for working from home so they can be more accessible to their children and to their families. Now, this represents a real monumental shift, okay, about the quality of time that is spent by fathers with their children. And I think it's an important point that we need to think about. And the question that I want to put to you all that are listening right now is, how are our services, how are the interfaces of services that support families responding to this shift? Are we very father friendly, and are we equipped to share and to respond to the current needs of men? I would argue that we're not, based by the evidence, and I would suggest we have very archaic and gendered ideas around parenting and family, as Katie has kind of highlighted in her presentation and talk. Now, I believe for me, in order to support this shift, promoting positive father involvement within our context will help this. But what is it? You know, what is this, Kevin? What are you talking about when you mention positive father involvement? Now, effectively, according to research, definition suggests that this is where we involve fathers in the direct work and to empower marginalized fathers to be a better resource for their children. And this may mean, within our context, being prepared to offer practical support, for example, around housing or benefits advice, and to help address issues like addictions or mental health problems, or issues around violence as well as part of that process. Practitioners are encouraged to use what is referred to as strength-based approaches, which balances criticism and praise and recognizes strengths as well as problems. So in instances where men were only felt that they were criticized, they were more likely to reject social worker intervention or support, and they'll generally withdraw from the overall support process. But I think, as Katie highlighted, we do need to think about how we understand masculinity as a society. I think we need to understand contemporary notions of fatherhood, especially given like Khalid's position as well, as he highlighted. We need to think about family dynamics, look at blended families. And in particular, we need to be sensitive to different cultural ideas about manliness and fatherhood, because these are deep rooted and they vary across cultures, ethnicities, and class. And I think we need to be able to be responsive to that. And that was lifted from Brandon et al.'s research as well, which I can share further details on. Now, considering my own research as the smaller scale project that I was involved in, I wanted to pilot this approach with social work students, as I said earlier. And we looked at this at London Metropolitan University with undergraduate and postgraduate students. And basically what I did was I compiled the literature review to explore some of the training needs in this area. And we did this between 2019 and 2022, like I said. And this worked across a 6-borough partnership. Because of the success and the interest in this also was extended to the USA as well, in Delaware, where they also contributed to this project. So I compiled a literature review and assessed the literature. We had 176 responses to the survey. There were 6 focus groups that were conducted with 120 participants in total taking part. And this included 1 online cross-borough focus group, because at this point, this was done during COVID, so I had to do it online. And then we also did an online focus group in the US as well as part of that process. And these were some of the initial findings and themes. Practitioners generally felt, and this was at the point of student social workers, as well as working with newly qualified social workers, felt that there was a lack of developmental spaces for thinking about dad, especially in understanding men as caregivers and equally as an excluded group. So they realized there was a need to think about this, but there wasn't really much time in their practice to be able to do so. Practitioners required particular training as well in conflict resolution, particularly around challenging behavior and dealing with the complex issues that comes with fatherhood. Some of those themes included dealing with parental alienation, navigating parental conflicts and domestic violence and abuse within families more generally, but also looking at issues around different cultural groups and different fathers from different ethnic backgrounds as also was lacking. It also, to some extent, I think, given their context in working mainly within social work, was that it revealed that there was an organizational culture of being anti-men in particular. And social work practitioners often shied away from working with men, particularly if they had a history of domestic violence. And once men and fathers were engaged, there were generally a lack of resources available, as Katie highlighted. There was a lack of training for professionals to think about this issue, as well as identifying relevant referral services, particularly for men in crisis. So looking at mental health issues, substance misuse, and there were significant cuts made to programs that were initially put in place to look at these very issues, particularly within the context of looking at men in contemporary masculinities. And this is just an image of the focus groups that I conducted where I got practitioners to engage with activities around how they would engage with fathers and some of the issues that fathers have. And this is just some of the participatory methods that were used to elicit and to draw out some of those themes. But as a practitioner as well as being interested in the research, I am also a coach. So I'm very much involved in raising awareness and delivering training around these issues for practitioners and how they engage with fathers more generally within the community. And through this process, I developed a coaching project called Daddy CPR, which ultimately looks at how we can build resilience as part of masculinities and looking at how we can prepare services to be able to respond to these direct needs and issues. And as part of this process, what I did was actually, I was very keen to look at how I could apply my existing research and that I found through the data to how we inform my coaching when working with those practitioners. Now, suicide is one of the biggest killers of men in the UK, and we're finding that links to toxic ideas of masculinity, in particular issues around family breakdown and societal pressures, increases this risk for men as fathers. And for me, I'm really committed to building a society that has workplaces, that has institutions that ultimately are cognizant of the challenges that men face and their vulnerabilities, but also are in a position to be able to empower men as fathers in times of crisis as well. Because I think we need to heavily invest in our resources around that as well when men are in crisis. So as part of that practice, I've produced an ebook. So if colleagues are interested in looking at this or finding out a bit more information around the context of my research in this area and how it relates to Daddy CPR, happy to share. And this is also developed into a course as well, where now I'm working with, as I said, local authorities and those that have the remit of engaging men as fathers to think about their practice and in responding to these changes and contemporary issues as part of their practice. Because I really do think services and practitioners across sectors need support around this area in particular. And I guess as a final thought, this is a quote that I took from one of the interviews that I conducted with our social work practitioners. And I think, yeah, she kind of sums up what we need to be doing really in terms of her quote. So she says that we need to challenge our initial prejudgments that mothers are the most important parent and that they are the ones that we need to engage more than the father. Often we assume that the father is the perpetrator of abuse, and as a result, we don't give him the benefit of the doubt. Men themselves feel this and therefore are socialized to accept this. Accept that this is the way things are and may not necessarily challenge this. They need the support to understand that the impact that this has or could have on their children, and not all professionals feel the same way. So effectively, not everyone in public services feel this way, and there are people that champion fathers and really think about dads as part of their support and recognize that we need to do away with gendered views of looking at parenting. But I have to be honest, in terms of my practice, they kind of make up a small percentage, and they're often with individual or small pockets of practice that exist when they're very responsive in this way. And I guess as a call to action for all of you that's online, because we've obviously, Medea's already highlighted the colleagues that are here to support this talk and to support this work. I wanted to ask you, what would, promoting positive father involvement look like within your context? And what would promoting positive father involvement look like for you personally and professionally? And what do you think about this kind of call to action for getting colleagues to think about exploring themes of masculinity and father engagement as part of education and general CPD? So I'm thinking in many ways, as there's been a focus on looking at men's mental health. Should we be also considering, the needs of fathers more generally in terms of our workplaces as part of training to become teachers, to become lecturers, social workers, practitioners? Should we be thinking about masculinity and these themes as part of training, as part of that process? Should this be a core component of our modules and our training? I believe it should be, but I'd be interested to hear your views. So if any of you are interested in learning a bit more, I'm happy to drop in my contact details into the chat, but it would be great to hear your views as part of this process. And I'm on Twitter and also on LinkedIn. So thank you for your time. But yeah, look forward to hearing from you, and do follow the work. And thank you for taking the time out to be with us this lunchtime. So thank you, Medea.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Again, brilliant presentation, very well timed. And I know I had two questions for you. And like Katie and like Khalid, you have touched on really important elements. I was again making notes here. How men are portrayed in media, particularly with stay at home. Would you like to unshare your screen now, please, Kevin?
Sure.
And I think you mentioned the strengths-based approach. You mentioned the Daddy CPR, which is, I think, a brilliant resource for us to use. And just to throw into the mix, I am a mother, and mothers on the call will probably identify with this, and fathers too. When we go to any service, any provider, we are identified as moms and dads. There is very little acknowledgement for the fact that we are, on a whole, a person too, in addition to being a mom and a dad. So I think that's really important, that recognition. And the last thing I want to add is the motherhood penalty, which in addition to all of the roles we are doing, all of the challenges we are navigating through, and I was reading the chat, it's really, really insightful how many experiences our colleagues have to share, particularly when fathers are taking their children out for shopping, for example, they are being told, oh, they're doing a great job and how wonderful a dad they are, for example. And for mothers, that is the normal everyday thing they are expected to do, hence the motherhood penalty. But anyway, I want to say thank you to my wonderful panelists today. Would you like to switch your cameras on again, please? Actually, it would be nice if we could all switch our cameras on, whoever would like to have that sense of community with each other. We are 6 minutes away. I want to say thank you to Khalid, to Katie, and to Kevin for this very, very useful. As you can see, there's never going to be enough time. And there we go. Teams has already told me we are 5 minutes away from finishing. I want to invite maybe 1 or 2 comments before I let you all go and enjoy your Tuesday afternoon. Anything anyone would like to, any reflections you might have, any comments you'd like to say? There was a very lively chat here going on. What are your thoughts, folks? Tell us. If you put your hand up, I'll call your name out and we'll take it from there. Martin, yes, please.
I was really interested in listening to Khalid there. It really resonated with me. I'm an old 60-year-old now, but I can remember years ago when I went out with this woman with children, and what you were saying, I felt as well. But I also felt that because they weren't my children, and I was coming as like their stepdad, and how step parents or stepdads mainly are perceived almost like sometimes a dodgy character, you know, someone who's, you know, and that really I had that in my head, and I think being a stepdad, now I've got 2 children who are grown up and have left. Being an actual, you know, a biological parent, a biological dad, I act totally different because I don't have that in my head. I don't have this what people are thinking, or, you know, how should I act, or what people are thinking, etc. And, you know, it's sometimes you take up so much time thinking about things that you don't get anything done, and you worry sort of. Are you worrying for worrying's sake, or? But yeah, but I really enjoyed what you were saying, Khalid. It was really good thing to hear. Almost like somebody else is saying the same thing as me as well. Many years gone by.
Yeah, and that was my aim, is, you know, hopefully this might resonate with some people. And again, with some of the things that Katie and Kevin's talked about, is having that support where you know, parents or, you know, males can feel, you know, sort of reassured, and not necessarily whether they're doing the right or the wrong thing, but through their experiences, and reassured and being heard and understood that you know, this isn't an unusual thing, or, you know, if you're feeling self-doubt, it doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong. It's just, you know, it's your learning and growing through this experience. And also it's just trying to navigate and understand other people. And I think coming into that, you are going to bring in some fears and doubts, and you're going to protect yourself, especially when you're coming into someone else's life. You know, there's so many things going on. There's wanting to be accepted, there's wanting to be loved, but there's also not wanting to cross the line. Then there's also knowing, am I doing the right thing? Then there's also thinking, well, actually, how much do the parents themselves know? There's a lot of things going on in your head. And when you don't have that place to have an open dialogue about it, or you don't have that space to talk about it, how do you know whether your thoughts and what you're thinking are, you know, guiding you to the right place? So being able to have spaces and being able to talk openly, being able to have that support for men as much as it is for women, it requires connection. It requires connecting with people outside of that relationship, or outside of that family, where you're going to get even an objective view or a supportive view. Because inside, when you're inside that family and those experiences, you know, you get caught up in the emotions, and you get manifested within the emotions of how other people are feeling or how you're feeling, and then it might not necessarily guide you in the right direction or give you that blind spot of perspective that you need. So having that support from other men or those groups of help will be very helpful for people. It would have been really super helpful for me in some times, and I think I've learned a lot and reflected on it as well. So thank you.
And this is exactly the purpose. Khalid, you brought me to my next point, actually. The whole purpose of this conversation today is to have these safe spaces, you know, away from family, away from friends, where we can feel slightly more comfortable talking about these conversations. And folks, we are 1 minute away. I had promised you I will let you go at 2. The very last thing to do, if at all, this conversation warrants another conversation. about practical tips. I think there were questions in the chat about what are the practical tips. I don't think we have time for that today, but if at all, I really hope this conversation today has resonated with you in one way or the other. We are very open to suggestions as the National Network for Parents and Carers. Feel free to get in touch. Feel free to reach out to us. Again, my massive thanks to Khalid for the open and honest conversation, to Katie for bringing to light how underrepresented fathers and male carers are, and to Kevin about talking about Daddy CPR. I promise you, I will send you a recording of this conversation, and let's just continue being in touch with each other. And let's hope that we will have more and more of these events to begin with, to raise the awareness, and we'll just take it from there. Bang on time, 1400 hours. That is when I call it a day. Thank you so much, everybody. And if my panelists could stay on for just a quick selfie, that would be amazing. But to the rest of the colleagues here, thank you so much. Take care and goodbye. And maybe a round of applause for the panelists, or a virtual round of applause. Fantastic. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all. Good to see you all.
Thanks very much. See
Brilliant.
you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Right, Khalid, Katie, Kevin, I think the chat says it all, really. You will see how receptive people are. You will see how it resonates with so many people, and you will see how much needed it is, really. I think this is if at all, this is what brings it home for me, that people are literally gagging for this sort of support, and they want to be heard, and they are receptive to asking questions. They are receptive to hearing advice. So I want to say thank you. And I do know that 1 hour is by no means enough, but like I say, this is always something that we can do within our time. I did put all of your details into the chat, so I hope that people will be in touch with you directly. What I wanted to do now was just take a quick selfie for LinkedIn, because, that's where we all shine. So how do we do that now? Hang on. I think I do know how to do that. Yes, I think I pressed print screen. So shall we do our best smiles on the count of 3, and then I try to take the selfie. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, and let me see if I got that or no. Can anyone else do that, please? In case I'm miserably failing at that. Does anyone else know how to do that?
I'll give it a go, and then I'll let you know.
Oh, you couldn't capture it. Oh.
I got it.
Oh, you got it. Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
I think maybe just for to be safe, on the safe side, let's just do one more. Okay.
Okay.
A big smiles. 1, 2, 3. Done. Okay.
I think that's the first time I've done a team selfie.
Yeah. Same here, Katie, actually. Yeah.
Perfect. What were your sort of main impressions from today? I'm just interested to hear. Khalid, you go first, Katie, you, and then Kevin, you.
Yeah, I thought it was really overwhelming response after I talked. To be honest, I didn't know what to expect. I was a bit nervous because I knew there was other people from within my organization.
I'm gonna need to stop the recording. Stopping recording now,
right.
guys.
Yeah, that's right. And